Hello, everybody, and welcome to quicksave, our weekly gaming-focused show here on Comic Book Nation. I am your host, Logan Moore. Joining me again, and wearing a hat as always, is Ricky Freck. Hello, Ricky.
Yeah, that part that much like war, that part will never change, Logan.
we do rock the hats every Thursday on this show. This is the official hat-wearing podcast of comicbook.com. Ricky, you've kind of teed up what we're going to be talking about today. And if you have seen the title of this episode, we're going to be talking about Fallout 5 and the Fallout sort of franchise here as a whole. If you've been following us on the Comic Book Nation feed for a bit, you've probably already seen that we've been talking about the Fallout TV show. We've got reviews and spoiler casts up for that if you want to go listen to it. But Ricky, for this episode, I wanted to kind of steer us to talk about the future of Fallout as a whole. Because strangely, this is now like the biggest. I don't want to say the biggest. Obviously, your stuff like Fortnite or Call of Duty is still out there bringing in millions of people. But Fallout is like the most popular gaming franchise at the moment. This show has kind of hit at a point where there's been a lull in new releases, unless you're, like a big Stellar Blade fan out there and you're waiting to play that this week. But there has been a huge return to so many Fallout games from the past. We've got the new Fallout Next Gen update, Fallout 4 Next Gen update, which is actually dropped the day we're recording this. So that game has now been improved on PS5, Xbox Series X, and PC. But then other than that, I think Bethesda said this past week that they had 1 million active players or not concurrent, but they had 1 million players dive into Fallout 76 on a single day. And then all the games across the board amassed 5 million players. And that's including, obviously, New Vegas, Fallout 3, Fallout 4, everything. So this franchise is huge right now. And Fallout has always been big, but I think we've kind of forgotten over the past couple of years just how big it really is, because Fallout 4 came out in, let's say, 2015, and I know 76 was 2018. So we're coming up on a decade without a new mainline single-player Fallout game. So let's talk about Fallout 5, because I feel like there is just a extreme hunger for this game right now, and that hunger is not going to be satiated anytime soon, because we know that the game is not going to release until after the Elder Scrolls 6. Elder Scrolls 6 is already very far away, which means Fallout 5 is likely, given how Bethesda's been making these games, probably like 2032, 2033 is what we're looking at.
But do you think that they'll bring in somebody else? Because that's been a rumor, right? That now that they're with Obsidian again,
Yeah,
maybe they could bring like a side story.
That's the thing I was going to bring up a little later, but I mean, yeah, we can just start there. Like, obviously, if everything stays the same as it is now, we're not getting Fallout 5 for close to another decade. So I feel like from Bethesda's perspective and from Microsoft's perspective, because obviously they own the Fallout IP now since they purchased Bethesda, I feel like you've got to get something else in the oven related to Fallout. Like, this is one of the 3 or 4 biggest franchises that Microsoft owns overall. Like, it's Halo, it's Gears, it's Fallout. Like, those are probably the 3 biggest that they own. And then Elder Scrolls probably sits in there somewhere. If they did do a spin-off game, though, or if they did do a new entry, do you think a new studio should swoop in and make Fallout 5 itself? Should Bethesda just mass hire 300 people to make a fully new studio to make this game at a new location or something like that? Like, what is your thought process of like what they should do?
Okay, so I'm going to answer a question you're going to ask later a little bit, and that is, are they going to incorporate the TV show? Because I know that's on our document to talk about. I'm going to go ahead and talk about it here. So I apologize for messing up your run of show. But when I was watching the TV show, and I'm a big fan of the show, big fan of the games, although not as big a fan of Fallout 4 as a lot of other people. But when I was watching the show, my biggest fear was becoming, are they going to see how much everyone loves Walton Goggins' character and then put him in Fallout 5 and Bethesda will ruin it because they sometimes struggle to write good, main character stories. So my idea, and I don't know if it's a good idea, but my idea is if they are going to incorporate the show, they should have somebody like Obsidian take it over, who's a little bit better in their writing department, and do a Fallout TV show, we're going to do a Fallout The Ghoul, right? Or something like that. And have, if they're going to incorporate the show, I think it needs to be in a side story, because I don't think I don't think it fits in, like, the larger Fallout 5. Like, I think it needs to be in a different location. I think it needs to be in a different, maybe even different time.
Yep.
So, I know, like, obviously ghouls can live for a very long time, so that's not so much of a problem if they wanna bring him in. But I think that if they're gonna do something with the show and around the show, it should be somebody else because I just don't trust Bethesda to be able to nail that character. And that's who they're gonna try to go after. That's like, become I mean, I guess maybe the girl,
Lucy.
Lucy?
Yeah.
I was about to say Ella, but that's her real name. Lucy, maybe they could go after her and bring her in, but I think the ghoul makes a lot more sense. And, I just don't think Bethesda will be able to nail that whole vibe and make him I feel like I feel like they'll ruin him. I don't know, I'm scared. I'm scared, Logan.
I I think that's a good idea generally speaking because I think that like you mentioned, ghouls live forever. So like the ghoul,
Yeah,
I forget his name, Cooper in the show,
yeah.
Cooper Howard. He has obviously lived for 200 years in this
Yeah,
universe,
yeah,
and there is a lot of backstory. I think they could do a prequel game centered around that character or
right.
something like that, where they're fleshing out past adventures or like bounty hunting expeditions he's gone on or whatever. Like there is so much room there for them to do something with that character. I think the hard thing though is like if you start wheeling up a game studio, I mean, this character has been created
Right,
by
yeah,
the showrunners of the TV show. So it's kind of the ghoul is kind of their baby to a certain degree. If you then fold in a new game studio or Bethesda or whoever, Obsidian, then make a character around that game, like then do you have to, incorporate the showrunners from the TV show? And then not
yeah,
only that, but then you have to start like we've already seen how people have reacted with the TV show itself and have been like, oh, there's lore inconsistencies and the timelines
ugh,
don't line up. And then you get stuff like that that's like on a whole nother level because it's like, well, why is Cooper Howard acting this way in the show when in the video games he does this? And so I think that would just be a really tall task. I think again, there's hundreds of years of
oh, yeah,
unexplored lore and
yeah,
backstory, and not just for the ghoul, but for Fallout as a whole. I think
yes,
it is the most straightforward, thing that people have been asking for forever is just, "Oh, just give us New Vegas 2." And I'm not saying New Vegas 2 is what needs to happen, but why can't we make a Fallout spin-off game very much in the same vein as New Vegas? Like, you can just I actually have an answer to that question myself, but, like, I feel like that's the most straightforward thing. The problem, though, with doing that and creating a game that would like, New Vegas was obviously based off of the architecture of Fallout 3.
mhm,
If you were to do a spin-off game now and have it modeled after the mainline series, like what exactly does that look like? Because again, it's been almost 10 years since Fallout 4. So you can't just be like, "Oh, let's work off of what we've got here with Fallout 4," because that game is it's not old necessarily. Again, millions of people are psyched to go play that game again this weekend with the new update. So there's it's not necessarily an issue, but like there is new improvements that can surely be made upon that core formula. And if you were to just go back and be like, let's grab I mean, Bethesda themselves have since like switched engines with Starfield and stuff like that.
right.
So like this is an older game that you really can't then make a spin-off game. I guess I answer my own question. You could use the Starfield engine and do something with that,
Yeah, that's what I was
I
gonna say.
suppose. Starfield is obviously still very similar to Fallout, just from broad gameplay systems and mechanics, and running around the universe and looting stuff, and like very very similar in that style. So they could do something with that, but I just wonder like whose call is it to make to do something like this? Like obviously
That's a good
Microsoft
question.
owns the IP,
Yeah,
but Bethesda feels very protective of it. And I feel like Microsoft does not want to come in and just be like, "Hey, we're going to make a Fallout game and you're just going to have to suck it up." Like I'm sure they don't want to like create any sort of internal strife in that
right.
way, but they've got to do something like this. And I think even if it could be a different genre, like the Fallout series has done different genres in the past, whether it be a tactics game or there
Yep.
was the Brotherhood of Steel, which was
We don't
not
talk about
good.
that. We
Yeah,
don't
that's
talk
a
about that.
horrible one, but I think you can make like a third-person shooter or something like that, a linear 12 to 15-hour third-person shooter or something set in the Fallout
Mm,
world, and that something like that could work. Like, it doesn't all have to be the exact, sprawling open world, sprawling locations of the Fallout series and stuff like that. So, getting back to Fallout 5 though, like kind of in that same vein, what do you think that game needs to look like, and what does that game need to actually like be?
I think so. I was thinking about this last night. I think that, and I know we just talked about Brotherhood of Steel, so I'm going to bring it up again, unfortunately. But that game is set around Texas. That is one thing. Okay, again, I'm just thinking of like, what are we going to bring from the show, right? So that's part of my uh, pitch here, right? Is that the parts of the cool part? One of the cool parts about the show is the ghoul, right? Everyone loves the ghoul. I keep saying it. It must be true. And, I think, like, his whole aesthetic of being, this, like, Western, gunslinger type of dude fits really well with Texas, and that's, like, one of the lesser explored areas of the United States. I think it would be cool, obviously, to take it overseas, but hopefully the Fallout London mod handles that, and we don't need to
I was
do
gonna
that.
say we've already got a modding group
Yeah.
trying to do that there, which is weird, but
Yeah. And then also that could tie it a little bit into New Vegas, which would be cool because, that's where the Caesar's Legion, the Red Okies are supposed to be from Oklahoma, so you could do some cool stuff in there. Also, I think Brotherhood of Steel is partially set in I think I believe I'm probably wrong, but I think it's called the Four States Commonwealth, which is like Kansas, Missouri, uh, Oklahoma, and one of those other states near us. And that's where a lot of that game is set. So I think there's a lot of cool stuff they could do in that area they haven't gone back to in like a proper Fallout game in a long time. So, and I think that also on top of that, if you set it in Texas, well then you could have DLC in Mexico, you could have DLC in even like Jamaica, right? You could go to the
mhm.
Caribbean. Like I think it's like a perfect location for what they want to do because they don't usually. I mean, I know Bethesda doesn't usually, I should say, go to like huge cities, right? They were in DC, Appalachia,
Boston.
Boston, but they don't
Yeah.
do like New York City, Chicago, LA, right? Like, so I think like Dallas or Houston or Austin, one of those cities could be very fun to do in and around there. But as far as like new mechanics, man,
This is what I've
I
been
gotta be,
struggling to think about
I
too,
gotta be
yeah.
honest with you, Logan. You know what the new mechanic I want back? Full dialogue would be great. I want that back.
Full
Uh,
dialogue
yeah, I
from
wanna see
Fallout 4?
no, uh, from the older games where you could see
Oh,
your full dialogue.
from, like, the
Yeah.
original games. I got you, yeah, yeah.
I wanna be able to know what I'm saying before I say it. That would be great. Um,
Yes, that's something that I feel like BioWare infected the video game industry with, where it's like, "Oh, we'll
yeah,
just put, like, a broad prompt here that you can select, and then you choose it," and it's, like, something completely different from what you anticipated that it would be. Um,
yeah. But I would like to see less time spent on like, how many people okay, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's just me. How many people were spending a ton of time building their settlement in Fallout 4 unless they were going for the platinum? Because I hated that
nobody.
mechanic. I
Yeah,
just
no
did
one
it
liked
to
it.
get the platinum, right?
Yep.
I would like to spend a little less time on like what I think is relatively superfluous. Like you don't need that. I don't really need crafting. I don't need item craft or weapon crafting that much. Like that's not a big deal to me. Maybe it is to other people. If it is, I apologize. Um, like spend that time making quests. I was actually reading a article, a thing I wrote on my blog in 2015, I guess, maybe 2016, about how why I didn't like Fallout 4. And it's because the reason I don't like it is because I compare it in the article to the synths in the game. And like in every mechanical way, it is better, right? Just like the synths are better humans, but there's no soul there because like if you go look at how many side quests and quests are in Fallout 4, compare it to Skyrim, it is so much smaller, so much smaller.
Mhm.
There's just way less to actually do, even if the game is technically bigger and more impressive.
It's a similar thing that happened with between Fallout 3 and New Vegas, and that's why people like New Vegas so much more, is that there's just there's a ton of more that there's a ton more interesting characters and storytelling opportunities
Yeah,
presented in New Vegas compared to 3. 3, outside of the main quest, I mean, there's side quests and things like that, but they're much fewer and further between compared to something like New Vegas. And I
right,
agree. I think that's like where the core, like even looking at Starfield this past year, like that game has some awesome quests in it. Like,
right,
and
yeah,
it's just stuff that you kind of stumble across out of nowhere. Like you'll be flying through space and bump into this group of people that are trying to determine whether or not an AI computer should be considered or a human or an actual being, and they don't know what to do with it, and like stuff like that. Just I think Bethesda still really shines with, and I think they do a fantastic job with those things. But yes, I do not think there was enough of that throughout Fallout 4. They focused on, the crafting and the weapon systems and adding the dialogue where your character is actually speaking now, and
Hmm.
like all of these things that are just sort of not really improving the core game itself. And those were also the issues that I ended up having with the game. And I had other problems. I don't hate that game, but there's just it's not my. If I was to rank like the modern Fallouts, which would be what 3, 4, New Vegas, it would easily be my third favorite.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
So I think it's really hard for me to know like what these games are going to look like in the future. And this is something that I've been thinking about a lot in the wake of Starfield, because Starfield came out, I think people had a lot of like appropriate criticisms of that game, and it's not perfect by any means, but like at the end of the day, it was a Bethesda game. You're running around, you're looting stuff, you're building out your character, you're leveling up, you're, exploring random stuff. And I feel like people were like almost shocked in some ways of like how that game's format was. Like, oh, why is it like this? Bethesda needs to change their formula. And it's like, well, at the end of the game, at the end of the day, they're gonna create sprawling open worlds or open universes in this case that you run around, that you level up your character, you collect. I mean, I can tell you exactly right now what Elder Scrolls 6 is going to look like. Like it's gonna be that same format. This is just how their games are. And obviously their games are beloved, and I love these games, and I get a craving to play one of them every now and then. Like I've been playing New Vegas a lot the past 2 weeks. But I don't I think people are a little beside themselves if they think that that sort of formula is going to change drastically by the time Fallout 5 comes out. Like it's going to be
Yeah.
a new game in a new location, vast open world that you run around first. I mean, all those staples are going to remain. It's just going to be look nicer. I assume the gameplay mechanics will be better, and they'll add some little things around the edges, kind of like we talked about they did with 4, whether it be crafting or whatever. Like that's just what the game is going to be. Um, I guess so. With that in mind, like I'm almost worried that like expectations are now too high for Fallout 5, because it will have been. Let's say it does come out in 2032 or 3. That's 17 or 18 years since Fallout 4. I mean,
Wow.
obviously not counting 76.
Wow.
And I think people are going to really think that it's going to have to be something far greater than it will be. I don't know. Like at the end of the day, like I said, it's going to be the same sort of thing, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But I just don't think people have their expectations properly aligned in that sense.
No, yeah, that's a good point. That I mean, that's so far, and people, you want to expect a huge jump, right? Like, how long was it between Fallout 2 and Fallout 3? That had to be a decade, right? At least.
Yeah, I think Fallout 2 was 98, and I think it was either 98 or 99, and then Fallout 3 was I think '07 or '08.
And
So
then, and then we're gonna wait, not quite twice that, but close to it, close enough
darn
to it.
near. Yeah.
Dang, man,
I
this
mean,
is why
it's been
Resident
it
Evil rules because they put a new game out like every other year.
That's true. I mean, it will have been. I mean, Todd Howard too has talked about how like it's just hard because they want to make the games faster, and they want to pump these out more quickly. But the game develop it's taking even longer to make games, which is
Yeah,
crazy because the dev teams are also getting larger. So I mean, logically you'd think like, oh well, they could probably make these faster because this dev team is 8 times the size of the one that made Fallout 3. And it's like, nope, that's
no,
just not
yeah,
how it works anymore. Um, Going back to Fallout 5 though, I wanted to we kind of touched on it like with the locations and stuff like that. And you mentioned like the middle of the country and the ties that they can have to some of these other games. You kind of touched on something though that I wanted to mention, which is just that the entire middle of the country is still like totally not explored in any of these games.
yeah.
And because we've only gone to the West Coast and the East Coast, and there has been some little spin-offs here and there that have explored stuff more towards the middle of the country. But I'm curious for them to. I think if they want to really shake up what Fallout looks like, they could go more towards like what does Fallout Midwest look like, or Fallout Chicago? Chicago's like big enough to where I think they could do a lot of interesting things with it because it is
Yeah.
a larger city compared to, like DC and Boston, like you were saying earlier. But like, I think there's a lot of interesting things they could do in a setting like that. And not only that, but like, has the middle portion of the country been nuked as badly as some of the others? Like,
Yeah.
what exactly happened? Like, I think they could really shake up the lore. Maybe some of these other states towards the middle of the United States are in far better condition than you would expect. Obviously, not to the point where it's like a haven and you're getting away from the core of what Fallout is, which is post-apocalyptic. But there's a lot of opportunities in that regard for them to, I think, shake up just what people have come to expect from Fallout by taking it to some very different locales. And also they could, introduce new factions,
Yeah, that
they could do all kinds of different stuff in that regard.
that was what I was gonna say. It's like if Obsidian gets their hands on it again, I would love for them to go to Chicago because they could do so many factions. That was the big part of one of the big parts about New Vegas was all the cool factions they had. And you got like the mob there. You could have, you could do a whole mob story in
Yeah.
Chicago. I mean, you could do it in New York City too, right? But I think New York City is probably too big for these types of games.
I think New York would be very, very complicated. I'm not
Yeah.
sure because like the thing about these games too is like they always blow up the scale of them to such a degree that like I know in Fallout 2 that game is like takes place in California, but you also like go up to Oregon and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And then like you wouldn't think that, but like this like the radius of where you're exploring in these games is often far larger than it is. So if you set the game in Chicago, sure you could have like a huge city hub, but then you could have all the suburbs around town and you could
Yeah.
explore the remnants of Wrigley Field or something like. I guess they already kind of did that in Fallout 4 with
Soldier Field.
Fenway. With
Soldier
Fenway,
Field this time.
Soldier Field, sure. The Caleb Williams home, soon to be. But yeah, I think Chicago's one that's jumped to. I think the thing that they always do really well in these games too is that they nail the vibe that each of these cities has, like in
Yes.
real
Yeah,
life.
absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of where they could, like you mentioned something like Dallas. Dallas doesn't have a real like when I think of Dallas, I don't really think of anything like super prominent. I know you're more from that part of the country than I am, so maybe there's something jumping out to you more that they could like really hone into. But like you mentioned Chicago and like there's the history of the mob, there's the history of like they could lean into like the city's history when it comes to like blues music or something like that.
Mhm.
Like there's a lot of like sort of tonal things that I think they could do in a setting like Chicago.
Yeah.
Um, that would resemble what they've done, with DC or New Vegas or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, Texas would be like if you wanted to go Old West style game, if you wanted to bring that kind of stuff in. I mean, maybe not even Texas. That's just, I think it's a good area for to build from. But you know, they got a lot of longhorn cattle and all that. So,
I wanted to ask before we kind of start wrapping up here. I want to ask you a couple other things.
mhm.
First off, here, um, Todd Howard has already talked about how he has like the core idea for Fallout 5 and that he already knows what the game is going to be, at least in a general sense. Does he end up making this game?
Hmm. That's a good question.
Like
How
he's
old
not
is he?
super old. He's in his
Yeah.
I just looked it up. He's in his mid 50s. So you would assume by the time Elder Scrolls comes out, he'll be pushing 60. I know a lot of these creatives, both in film, TV, and games, like to stick around and make stuff until they no longer can't. Essentially,
Yeah.
like somebody like Kojima has said, like, no, I'll do this until I'm dead. Like, and I think that's the mindset a lot of them have. But I do also wonder, like, I could see somebody like Howard just like stepping away at some point in the coming years because as that team continues to expand and blow up, I imagine his job gets drastically more stressful. Like
Yeah.
he's probably just not available to the
Yeah.
people that he needs to be available to on a day-to-day basis. And I guess what I'm saying is like maybe the series should unshackle itself from him a little bit. Maybe it already is internally, but obviously the public perception is that
Right.
like he's the father of all of these things. And I don't think that's necessarily true.
Yeah.
Um,
But that's how it works. Yeah, I mean, I could see, that happened to a lot of Blizzard guys, right? Like it just became so big that they stepped away and formed their own studios. I could see Todd Howard doing that. I don't think he probably will, but I could definitely see it. I don't know. I think he'll probably stick around and maybe not work as much. Like take like more of a consultant role on the series.
Mhm.
Maybe I don't know, but I definitely think like I see him, and this is just my perspective. I see him as more of the Elder Scrolls guy than the Fallout. I mean, I know
I
he's
do
both,
too.
right?
I
But
do
like,
too.
but I don't know. I don't see him as the father of Fallout. That's what's his name?
Tim Kaine,
Yeah,
Leonard Boyarsky, I think is the other guy
yeah,
who helped co-create it.
yeah.
Um, yeah, Tim Kaine's out there consulting too right now. Like you could have
hmm
him come back and
He,
consult on a project like this, and
I believe he's consulting with Obsidian right now,
he
Logan.
is on Outer Worlds 2, I
Yeah,
think. He directed the first game. He's not
yeah.
directing the sequel, but I know he's still like helping to oversee it or whatever.
So yeah,
Um,
I think you could definitely see Todd Howard doing something like relatively similar. Maybe not exactly that way, but where
it
he's just
just
kind of like in the room while the decisions are being made, even if he's not the main decision maker.
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we're titling this episode that Fallout 5 needs to release sooner rather than later. And I think that's just the core of my idea. Whether that's, Fallout 5 itself releasing in the coming years, it's just something needs to be done. And you would have to imagine conversations are being had internally right now. Like,
hmm
this is huge. Like, we forgot that this is as big as it is. The TV show has awoken the money potential that those in charge at Microsoft can surely wring out of Fallout.
yeah,
So if those conversations aren't being had, then I would just be baffled. Especially because like Microsoft needs more wins still. Like they've snatched up
yeah,
all these studios and all these IPs, and they are still playing third wheel to Nintendo and PlayStation within the larger picture of what's happening in the video game industry right now. And
right.
so you got to do something with Fallout. Whether it's Fallout 5, I don't know. Maybe Fallout 5 is the end of Howard's run at Bethesda. Maybe they let that be his final thing and leave that kind of untouched and don't try to fast track it. But something has to be done with this IP other than just updating Fallout 4 and Fallout 76.
Logan, how do you feel about Fallout Shelter 2?
That game was very fun. I
Yeah,
I I killed a lot of time at my job back in 15 playing that game.
yeah.
So, sure. Is that going to scratch the itch I have for a new Fallout game? No,
No.
but it's something. I did want to ask
Oh
quickly,
man.
have you been playing any of these games recently and are you planning to?
I've downloaded Fallout 76. I think I have like 3 chapters left in Rebirth. So once I
Okay.
finish Rebirth, I'm gonna jump into Fallout 76 for the first time ever. Because I boycotted it because they didn't have NPCs at launch, and then just never went back. Because I don't look, Logan, when you've been in the WoW mines like I have been back in the day, it's scary to go back to an MMO. So
Yeah. I have not played it either. Maybe we could do it together though. Maybe we could dive into that one together. I'm gonna keep playing New Vegas though. I need to.
that's a
I just
smart
got to
choice.
the strip. What's great is like I've forgotten so many things about this game somehow. Like I forgot that there's an entire gang of Elvises once you get to the
Ah,
strip in that game. Like
yes.
there's just so much stuff that I've forgotten because I haven't played it since like the year it came out, which was
Yeah.
2010. So half my life has passed since then. Um, Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode here with Quick Save. We want to hear from you, though. So if you are listening to this episode, feel free to reach out to us on social media. I'm at Moreman12. Ricky is at Ricky. Are you just at Ricky Freck
Yeah.
on socials? Reach out to us. Be sure to hit us up. Let us know what you want to see from Fallout 5. Let us know if you've been playing the games for yourself lately. And other than that, be sure to subscribe to our Comic Book Nation feeds if you want to keep up with everything else we're doing. We've got the poll list. We've got our I think it's the Anime Initiative, but I might be totally wrong about that. Maybe I'm not in line with the comic book branding for all these things. We've got an anime show though. We've got a comic show, and then we've got the weekly Comic Book Nation episode or weekly Comic Book Nation show, which goes up every Friday. So be sure to subscribe on podcast feeds or check us out over on the Comic Book Nation YouTube channel. That's going to do it here for Quick Save. We will be back next week talking about something else. Until that time, have a good week, everybody. Bye bye.